Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar on the general purpose AI tools for transfer pricing. Today, me and Sven will be sharing our insights on the recent developments in AI space and how it can be used and how those tools are useful for transfer pricing professionals. First things first, let us introduce ourselves. So my name is Borys. I'm a founder and CEO of AI. By my background, I'm a transfer pricing professional. I started my career around 12 years ago. I worked through several roles of Big Four, and then most of my career I spent in-house working for Royal Dutch Shell as a global transfer pricing manager. And then around 2 years ago, I started AI, and Sven joined me also as a co-founder, and we're jointly building this company together, which we will tell a couple of words about in a minute. But first, Sven, over to you for a short intro.
Yeah, thanks, Boris. So I'm Sven. I also have a background in tax and finance, and I joined AI about a year ago now, working together with Boris to basically redefine transfer pricing using AI and data. Before joining AI, I was working at a Big Four for about 8 years, finally as a manager, working on data analytics solutions for large multinationals, trying to make them use data in a better way to support their functional analysis and TP policies. So that really drove me to look into new ways of using technology and data, and I was very happy to meet Boris, who shared this vision.
Great. Thanks, Sven. Maybe a couple of words about AI. We are an AI technology company in the transfer pricing space. So what we're combining is transfer pricing expertise with artificial intelligence expertise. Our core solution currently is an AI-powered platform that performs transfer pricing benchmarking studies, substantially accelerating the workflow of preparing comparability analysis. It analyzes hundreds of potential comparables in a few minutes and generally provides, in addition to a substantial time saving, generally better quality documentation and also better audit trail and supporting information that helps not just prepare benchmarks, but also defend them in case of tax authorities challenges, or if your client is basically asking for more details, that's also pretty helpful. Let's talk about our agenda for today. So we will start with AI in transfer pricing overview, and there we will mostly talk about AI progress in the last couple of years, maybe 18 months, where most of the things were happening in our industry and how this is relevant for transfer pricing and which tools and which technologies have an impact on our profession and our workflows. And we will then move to practical AI use cases in transfer pricing. So we will just go into demoing you or sharing with you a few examples of how we use AI tools in our transfer pricing work, and after also hundreds of conversations with transfer pricing advisors around the world, what they have shared with us as their examples of what they are doing with AI. I think that's pretty interesting. And then at the end, we will talk about a little bit about common challenges and useful tips. We will talk a little bit about benchmarking studies as one of the use cases for artificial intelligence in transfer pricing, because we're specializing in this topic. But that's, I think, is a good also example of how AI is transforming our profession.
Yeah, I think it's one of the best use cases.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. With a little bit of irony there. All right. So Sven, handing over to you for recent AI developments and, well, basically which tools to use in 2025.
So before we continue talking about AI within transfer pricing, it's probably good to have a quick understanding about what specific AI we're talking about here. So we're talking about LLMs, which stands for large language models. And large refers to the amount of data that has been used to train these models. They're trained on basically the whole internet, which means that they look at all of this data available and try to find logical patterns within this. And the reason that this is powerful is that it creates a sort of an understanding of language for the AI. So by looking at these patterns in all of this data, it understands that, well, based on the words that you provided as an input, the following words are logical output. And this sounds like a not too powerful capability, but actually, because it's trained on such enormous amount of data, it gets you really far, and it's a super powerful capability for things like text categorization, summarizing, text generation, analyzing sentiment, because the data available online is so gigantic that it really provides a good enough basis to make powerful inferences on this data. An important consequence of that it's being trained of all of the data is that it has a non-knowledge cutoff date. So it's being trained on all data that's available upon a certain moment. So data that became available after that moment is not used for the training and is therefore not available for the model. So if you want to ask questions about more recent events, you need to provide more context yourself, and then it will apply its old understanding of the world, basically, on this new data to make some inferences of what a logical outcome is. So that's something that's really important to keep in mind when we're talking about AIs and LLMs. It's about providing context, for the right context for the right situation.
Maybe Sven, just finishing on the topic of recent developments, maybe a few takeaways here.
Yeah, so well, a lot of developments in terms of new models that are released. The most recent model from OpenAI is 4.5. They recently released O3, which is a reasoning alternative to the normal set of models. Then we have a new model from Claude, DeepSeek. So those developments in that area, which means that basically the AI becomes smarter and smarter every day. And we see that it's really capable of performing a lot of use cases where we now use humans. And this is being tested in all kinds of benchmarks. So we're not talking about transfer pricing benchmarks now, but benchmarks that test the capabilities of these models. And what we see is that they're just crushing these benchmarks at a faster pace than anyone was expecting a year ago. So yeah, really fast-paced development. And then we just have all of these new features that make it more and more capable. So we have reasoning, which we touched upon. We have the capability of web search. So instead of just relying on its training data, it's also able to access the web, get context from the web, and use that in the answer. Alternatively, you can create projects in the AI tools. We will go into more detail on that during our demo. And recently, deep research was released, which is also a big breakthrough. But I think we can talk about it, but it's probably better to just show it during the demo.
So let's have a look at the tools that we are using today for our workshop. The first one is Perplexity. Perplexity is effectively an AI-enabled search. So this is like a Google on steroids, you can say, which does a lot of Googling for you and then gives you a concise and summarized answer based on the information available on the web. Sven partially touched on that, talking about web search. It's very useful when you need a factual answer to your question. So for quick factual Q&A, it is kind of helpful. We will do a couple of demo queries and see related to transfer pricing to see like how it actually works and what are the pros and cons of that. ChatGPT Projects. Why it's helpful is that you can give it a repetitive piece or like standardized piece of your data to work with, and then it is especially helpful for standardized tasks. So for things like tasks automation or repetitive tasks, ChatGPT Projects is pretty helpful. There are alternatives to ChatGPT Projects, like you have also in Claude you have projects, but largely they all work the same. So this is still chat, but with additional context and additional set of instructions that are repetitive over several tasks we will show you in a couple of minutes. And then the last one is ChatGPT Deep Research. Again, there are a couple of alternatives already to it. Perplexity has Deep Research. XAI also has a Deep Research in it. But basically what it is capable of is in-depth analysis of certain topic or certain set of topics that you want AI to analyze deeply, not just giving you an answer based on its knowledge, not just giving you a quick answer based on web results as Perplexity does, but do a deep analysis and give you the extended answer on a topic using a lot of resources and spending a lot of time on researching the topic. And certain TP tasks that are good use cases for deep research, so which are specifically focused on searching through a lot of sources of information and giving you a holistic answer. So what are the use cases in transfer pricing we're going to look into now? For Perplexity, we will ask it a few questions on TP regulations and see if the answers are good, how it answers those questions. Can you rely on them? Should you rely on them? In which scenarios should you or should you not? Then for ChatGPT, we have functional analysis. That's one of the, maybe you know, maybe you're not, but when I started Arms Length AI, one of the first tools was about functional analysis. And now we will basically recreate that tool with ChatGPT Projects. And that will also give you a good intuition about how more complex transfer pricing workflow can be replicated with a modern ChatGPT version of ChatGPT. And then deep research, industry analysis, drafting that section, again, something that many of us do. ChatGPT deep research is very good at that. Really, we will see how it works and validate the output a little bit. So going through it, but also just explaining you how that deep research can help you with that task. And of course, case studies review, also one of my favorite topics. Recent disputes, recent transfer pricing use, how deep research can help you analyze that and see if it can discover something interesting that we as transfer pricing professionals even may not have heard of or may not have thought about when facing specific question. So let's dive in. Let's start with our practical workshop demo. And here, heading over to you, Sven, for the first part, which will be asking Perplexity something related to transfer pricing regulations and rules.
Okay. Let me share my window. Okay. So imagine that I need to do something in Poland. I'm not an expert in any way into Polish law. So this would be a really good question for me to ask to Perplexity. So one thing I'm always curious about is when the deadlines are for certain compliance obligations. So let me just ask it for transfer pricing deadlines in Poland for 2025 and see what it comes up with. And luckily we have Borys, who's not from Poland either, but who does live in Poland and is a bit more familiar with the local regulations. So let me see what we got here. In Poland, the transfer pricing deadlines for 2025 are as follows. Preparation of the transfer pricing documentation must be completed by the end of the 10th month following the end of the tax year. So that would be October 2026. So the nice thing is here that we have sources. You see these little numbers. So you can quickly verify if these are indeed correct. And I can also ask Borys if this is correct. Is this correct?
Yeah, I think so far it's correct. In Poland, we like changing transfer pricing deadlines, typically extending them. So I think in the last few years, there were at least several cases where that was moved at least 1 month, sometimes 2 months, sometimes even more forward, which is generally good for taxpayers. But yeah, I think that's correct. And
okay.
on
the next one.
Yeah.
Sorry, go on.
No, please continue.
So the TPR, so that's a transfer pricing return, I guess. Must be filled by the end of the 11th month. So 1 month later.
Yes.
Is that also correct?
Yes.
That's funny. Well, if requested by the tax authorities, you must complete transfer pricing documentation within 14 days. And documentation without transfer pricing analysis within 30 days of the request.
Yeah, that's fine. You formulated quite funny. It used to be 7 days, now it's extended indeed. I'm not 100% sure. I haven't checked yet for 2025 if this is correct. I hope it is.
And but can we ask a follow-up question? So so here we see documentation without transfer pricing analysis within. What does that mean? So the simplified form of transfer pricing documentation that does not include detailed benchmark studies.
Yeah, there is such thing in
so if you're exempt for transfer pricing.
Yeah, it's kind of not full exempt, but there are certain transactions, depending on the materiality of those as well, where you're not required to have a benchmarking study, a separate benchmarking study for, which is a little bit funny. Can you also ask it? So we have, I think it's formulated and ordered a little bit funny. So we have a preparation of transfer pricing documentation as a third bullet point. Then we have a submission of TPR, which makes sense. Then we have a submission upon request, which also makes sense. And then we have master file submission. Can you ask it if the master file actually should be submitted proactively?
Yeah, this always, I guess in most jurisdictions, this is not necessarily the case.
Yeah. Good. Yeah. So indeed, it doesn't have to be proactively submitted, neither local file nor master file. The only thing that you need to submit is TPRC form. But yeah, it knew the answer. And like, I think maybe that's a good point also to look at the sources and understand how it actually answers and formulates the questions.
Yeah. So let's look into the original sources. So here it used 8 sources. And what you see is that it mostly uses so Forvis Mazars, Crow, Grant Thornton. So it uses mostly data or documents that has been created by advisors. So it doesn't...
In English, I think that's also an important point, right?
Yeah, in English. And is that because we asked the question in English that we're getting
the response?
Yeah,
if you try in Polish, then it would give you sources in Polish, which I think is generally probably better if you know the language. And you ask a question in the language of the, let's say, if you're looking at the legislation of a particular country, because the quality of sources in local language may be better generally, if the jurisdiction is especially a bigger one. But I think it's like you also need to, when you're using Perplexity or you're using ChatGPT with search, which is another alternative to Perplexity, you need to understand this, right? So it answers the questions based on the summaries in this case, but that's typically the scenario, right? So it searches with the web. It looks for the most popular pages for a particular topic, which is in this case transfer pricing regulations and the deadlines in Poland, and then effectively summarizes it, extracts information, does sometimes some cross checks, I guess, where several sources may give answers, and then if there are more answers of the similar nature, then it will give you the that answer instead of if there is one source which tells something else, then it will probably ignore it. So there is some reasoning happening in this scenario, but it's pretty limited, right? So the answers that you're getting with it are as good as the sources that are available on the web. And if your advisors are not, or well, generally the sources that it uses and the advisors were not updating their materials with the latest developments, for example, which is happening in Poland quite often, where there will be new requirement or the existing requirement will be changed or the deadline will be moved, then the answer that you will get may be outdated or may be inaccurate. Just because the sources are not there or sources are not updated, or most of the sources are talking about something which is outdated.
Yeah, and it's, well, here I see, for example, the OECD as a source, so that's good, but yeah, you can try to force it to use a particular source, but it's not always successful.
Exactly, yeah. I think like if you are a transfer pricing advisor and you really want to have an accurate answer, you really need to make sure that a large language model will use the source that you want it to use, which is in this case probably something like Corporate Income Tax Act and a few other papers or regulation papers that are relevant for Poland. So the source law, instead of using summaries of tax advisors. But to do that, Perplexity is quite difficult to steer in that direction. So what you would probably do better is find the sources and paste the whole source into the ChatGPT and ask it to answer your questions based on the source, which is, I think, like projects is particularly.
Yeah, I think this will be a perfect use case for projects, but we will come to that in the next, one of the next topics.
Yeah,
but it's interesting. So I think it's a really good starting point. It's good to get a feel, also to get some kind of understanding of the more sensitive areas, I guess. Maybe even if you want to prepare for a conversation with your advisor or with your auditor, try to communicate with the AI, see if you yeah, if your feeling on the topic is more or less correct or not, and where there are sensitivities.
Yeah, but don't rely on it for deadlines of 100% because you can, yeah.
Although they were correct here, right?
Yeah, they were correct, at least again as of today. But I imagine if tomorrow the deadline will change, and you will ask the day after tomorrow, then you will probably get the wrong answer because the sources that it will be using are not yet updated, right? Advisor didn't write new articles about new deadlines yet, or they were not indexed by Perplexity or by Google to show up on the main page, and therefore it may just not see those sources with new articles about new deadlines, effectively. So, especially in dynamic environments, it can be tricky.
Yeah. On the other hand, if there are no target articles published by your advisor, it may also be that the advisor is not aware of the changes yet. And,
yeah.
So you have some of the human pitfalls that apply to the AI, and that's quite common to see.
For sure. For sure.
Okay, but I hope that this gave a bit of a feeling on the capabilities of Perplexity. Are there other things you want to show, Borys?
On Perplexity, no. I think we can move on to another topic.
Good. Yep.
Okay. So let's do some functional analysis.
That sounds good.
I like functional analysis. Let me share my screen with you. And so I'm now in ChatGPT. And what I wanted to show you is how to use projects and how you can make it do good functional analysis. So let's think about functional analysis. Right? Functional analysis is a type of analysis where you have certain expectations, certain approaches to doing it. Like you have a certain structure of how you write it. You have functions, assets, and risks. You have side A of the transaction, side B of the transaction. You have different functional profiles that you would be using like as a labels basically for entities like limited risk distributor or full-fledged manufacturer, etc. And then you would probably also have, at least in your head, but there are also sources of that, a list of possible functions, assets, and risks that you would typically analyze. IRS was publishing a list of that, and a few other tax authorities, and I think United Nations manual at a certain point had a list of functions, assets, and risks that you may want to analyze when you do the function analysis. So there is all of that knowledge, and unfortunately or fortunately, large language models don't really know all of that, like holistically about functional analysis. It has like a general idea of functional analysis of how it works, but it doesn't necessarily know like the way transfer pricing professionals would structure their functional analysis. It doesn't have all of the functional profiles in its mind, and sometimes it may confuse different things. It may not like have all the possible functions, assets, and risks in its mind about like which you need to analyze. So it's a little bit like if you really want to get a good functional analysis, then just going to ChatGPT and saying like, just give me a good functional analysis based on this contract may not just give you a very good result. That's why projects is a good way to approach that, especially as soon as you have a workflow like doing functional analysis that is repeating from time to time. And let me just show you how you can set it up. So when you're in ChatGPT, you can click on New Project, and let's call it Functional Analysis Prep. So that would be a project for creating functional analysis. And it tells us like what projects are for. Projects keep chats, files, and custom instructions in one place. Use them for ongoing work or just to keep things tidy. Nice, thanks. Let's create this project. And then we can do two things. We can add files and add instructions. So maybe let's start with adding instructions. Instruction is kind of a prompt that will be always used when you start a new chat or new conversation in this functional analysis project. And I actually prepared one already, and let me just show you how that one looks like. I'll just copy and paste it, and then we can just quickly go through it. And you will understand why is it important. So first of all, we're giving it some context. So we will tell it that you're a transfer pricing functional analysis writer. And then we also tell it which sources it will be provided with. And what I'm going to provide it, and I'll show you how I do that. I'm going to provide it with a library of possible functions, assets, and risks because I have it. I wanted to use this library of possible functions, assets, and risks. And I will also give it a library of functional profiles or entity characterizations that I wanted to use, right? So I want this functional analysis to work more or less as a standardized workflow using those standard framework that I will give it. And then I can give it some additional instruction here. So what I'm telling it is that in your functional analysis, use the functions, assets, and risk and entity characterizations. Use only ones from the list. Don't create your own again, maybe that's what I want. Maybe I want it be more creative. So if in your scenario you can do it differently, but that's how I prefer it to do it. Do not include functions, assets, and risks that are not performed relevant for either side of the transaction. So I don't want it to analyze 300 functions, assets, and risks. In each case, I only wanted to use relevant ones for this specific case. In your analysis, select and include only relevant functions, assets, and risk, and ignore the rest. I think I added it to reinforce the message. And yeah, I think it maybe went too much into this reinforcement. Let's keep it a little bit shorter. And then I also give it a functional analysis format, like how do I want it to look like, the output to look like. There is only one option in this case. So I wanted to start with entity A, so first entity, and I ask it to replace it with the name of the entity. And then I have function section, then I have function A, B, C, and then description for each of that functions. Same about assets, so I have asset section, and then I have asset A, asset B, asset C, asset D, and a description of each. And then I have the same for risks, right? So that's how it will be structured. And then I have the same for entity B. So I have first entity A analyzed, then entity B analyzed. And then at the end, I wanted to conclude this functional analysis with entity characterization and with assumptions and follow-up questions to be asked from companies. So assuming I'm doing this functional analysis as an advisor, and I want AI also to suggest me which questions I may ask from the participants. So that's how
maybe it's nice to emphasize that this is all free format. You can structure it any way you like. So if you think like, no, I want a different structure, that's completely fine. And you can do it however you want.
Exactly. And the reason I had this option 1 as which I deleted now was that I actually had like several options of formats of functional analysis, and then I could tell LLM to prepare it in a particular format. For example, you can have it as a table where you would have it structured in different order, for example, and yeah, a few other cases like that. Yep, let's save this one. And as you remember, I mentioned having a library of functions, assets, and risks, right? Something I have already, and I will attach to it. Let me just show you how that one looks like. And just let me share my screen with the document that I prepared separately. So I have functional analysis library. This is a list of risks and then functions and then assets that I wanted to consider when doing functional analysis. This is based on a few public sources and also my personal experience with doing functional analysis. I wanted to use this list because I know that it's, well, the list that you would typically want, or the functions accessories that you would typically want to be analyzed. And it's pretty extensive. And then the same I have for functional profiles or entity characterization. So I have a list of functional profiles here, things like commission agent, limited risk distributor, fully fledged distributor, with an explanation of each of those, what those mean. So when LLM will be doing functional analysis for me, it will try to assign those profiles to entities that are being analyzed. And so
again, and now you've designed it so that it will force to assign it to one of these functions, right?
Yes, yes. So when you looked at then those instructions, there was an instruction which said, finish your functional analysis with entity characterization from the list of entity characterization that I have.
And one nice thing you could do is, for example, say, okay, if you don't feel like any of the characterizations matches the profile that has been uploaded, also mark it or warn me. So that would already be a good sensitivity check, whether your functional analysis actually makes sense.
For sure, for sure. Yeah, so I now attach those two documents, and yeah, let's do that. So let's say concluded an entity characterization. If no profile matches, flag this. Something like that. I mean, it's not perfect prompt now. It could be optimized further, but I think for this type of task, it should be good. And then, like, okay, I have this whole project set up, and how do I actually, well, do now functional analysis with it? So I need to give it like the context to work with, the case description, the materials. What I remember from my days of doing a lot of functional analysis, we often start with intercompany agreement, right? So we would typically request an intercompany agreement from a customer, or sorry, from a client, and then we will do the first draft functional analysis, and then we will, of course, confirm it and do the set of interviews, which is another possible use case of AI is to create those questions for your functional interviews. But let's just give it some agreement and ask it to prepare a functional analysis based on it. So I have this intercompany agreement, which I found on Security Exchange Commission, the US SEC, where some companies are publishing or companies are obliged to publish some of their intercompany agreements. So there is a distribution agreement now between two parties. Altera, I think that's the name of the party number one, and then Aero Asia Distribution is party number two. One of them is a distributor, the other one is more of a principal. This agreement is pretty long, so how many pages is here? 16 pages, and it has a lot of context. It has a lot of details about this transaction. So what we can do now is we can try to create a functional analysis based on this intercompany agreement. And how we do it, we can just attach this file, just a PDF file. We could, of course, also copy-paste the content. Sometimes that's better than attaching the PDF. But in this case, we can just attach this PDF, and then we can tell it, please prepare functional analysis for this contract/transaction. And yeah, the model we're going to use for O is fine. We could use a reasoning model for it. We could use GPT 4.5 for it. I don't think there is a strong preference from my side on which model to use.
No, maybe O1 makes more sense in this context because we want more critical thinking.
Let's go.
And here, so both Model 4.0 and O1 both have multimodality, so that means that they can understand and interpret this PDF as well, even if it would have been a non-computer readable PDF.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question, actually. I don't know. I haven't tested it for a while. Would it work with the scanned PDFs, or will it first try to OCR it through Python? I think there is some, yeah. I don't know how it works now. Okay, cool. Let's have a look. Below is the sample function analysis in the requested format, reflecting the key points from the distribution agreement. And then you have entity A, Altera International Limited, identified correctly, functions, R&D, design and engineering, manufacturing, production, quality control, intangible property management, and then description of how this function is performed by the side of the transaction. Assets, tangible assets and intangible assets. The reason it's structured this way is because we asked it explicitly in the instruction to structure it this way. And I read this agreement, and I also have the recollection of the list of functions, assets, and risk and functional profile. So I think it makes sense overall, this functional analysis. And then it gives you a likely characterization, which is, in this case, can be viewed as fully fledged manufacturer, and more broadly, the principal driving the product's development and production. Makes sense. And because then you have,
these are two independent parties, or
no, they are associated.
Okay.
And then the second one is a distributor, again, well-structured, detailed functional analysis, which is aligns with a fully-fledged distributor in this case, likely characterization, and then the explanation why it's saying so. Then you have a conclusions and entity characterization, and then some assumptions and follow-up questions, which are pretty nice because you can then take it from there and ask your client and finalize your function analysis. Yeah, and that's how you use projects. So you give a detailed instruction, you give a lot of context and rules on how you want this analysis to be performed. And then the only thing you do when you have a new functional analysis to do is just to provide the content for the new functional analysis, like in the case you do this type of workflow. So it works with a lot of your provided instruction and knowledge that you can share with it and use repetitively. So that's, I think, the general idea of this project for functional analysis in this example.
And it's really great because you can also fine-tune it. So if you use it multiple times, you can just fine-tune the instructions. So the next time you use it, it will be a little bit better.
Exactly. And I think I had another prompt here, which would summarize it in a table format as well. So as you know, we have this, we like in transfer pricing those tables, which would be ticking the boxes and doing the summary table basically for functional analysis. I think I have it somewhere. Just give me. Yeah, I have this prompt. Let me just paste it and show you how that would work. Please take provided functional analysis and create a table in the below format. The table should include all functions, assets, and risks that are mentioned. Name sites based on the functional analysis. Here is the format of ticks I want you to use, and columns should be, those are the columns I expect. Name of function, assets, and risk, side A, side B. I may want to switch to, for O for this task, because it's not very complicated one, doesn't require a lot of reasoning. Let's see.
Basically takes the output from the previous question and uses it here.
Yeah, and it does something funny because it does some Python code to create this table. Let's see how it will look like. That's a little bit unexpected. I expected it just give me a table. Yeah, but that looks fine as well. I think it did me created even an Excel table probably, or CSV table for it. So yeah, it tagged listed all the functions, and then it tagged them who of those two sides perform the function or asset, or have the asset, or have the risk associated with it, which is pretty cool. And then you can just copy paste it.
Yeah, but this also highlights a very important capability of these models, is the ability to code. So imagine that you have some kind of data output from your ERP system or a HR system, and you need to do some kind of analytics on it. Probably you can just upload it to your project and start asking questions about it.
Yeah, for sure.
If the data regulations within your company allow it.
Yeah, that's another point. Yeah, I just told it I don't really need a CSV or Python code. Just give me a table, and then it just gave me a table as well.
And you can also fine tune it, right? If you want to right align the. Yeah,
I think what you can do is in instructions you could say finish it with a table, and don't use code and CSV for creating the table. Basically, I think that would work. Cool. And then
it's a powerful feature.
Yeah, I think it's really powerful. And for transfer pricing, there are as soon as you have some repetitive workflows that you can standardize to a reasonable degree and have standard set of instructions, just use project. I think it's awesome. And now let's move on to the deep research. I think that's the most powerful and the coolest feature, I think, so far from everything we have in large language models. So how it works is that you may ask AI to do some in-depth analysis of certain topic, and then it will go and spend some time and do that research, and then come back to you after some time with the answer. To enable it, depending on your version and subscription, you may have it already or may not yet have it. But if you don't have it yet, you will have it soon. You just enable deep research when asking something, and then what I will do first, I will ask it to create an industry analysis or market overview of a certain market, and I will show you how the results look like. So recently I had this case where I needed to prepare, or our client needed to prepare, a detailed market overview of car paints in Europe in 2025, because they were preparing some local file for that transaction. So that's what we can ask it to do. And then before it will start answering the question or doing the deep research, it will ask you several follow-up questions to actually narrow down or to specify the research it's going to do. So here it asks me to clarify a few things. Are you looking for OEM car paints used in manufacturing or aftermarket car paints? Do I want an overview to focus on specific countries or the entire Europe market? Are you interested in any particular types of paints? Should the overview include market size, key layers? And then my typical answer is always yes, please do everything, which we'll do here as well. And then some questions may be, sometimes the questions may require more specific answers, but typically I go with this. And then when I click on it, it then will tell me that, well, yeah, thank you, I understood the task, and then I will start analyzing it and come back to you once it's ready. And then you will have this timer, which is clicking. It takes from 3 minutes to sometimes even 20 minutes to complete. And then we don't need to wait because I already did that, and I will show you the results. So I asked the same question, and then it asked me kind of the same questions, but a little bit different before launching the analysis in previous time. And then I also told it yes to all questions. And then I think here it took around 15 minutes to prepare all that analysis. And then, so what it does, right, before we go into the results, it goes and initiates a ton of different searches around the web. So it searches through web for industry reports, any news, any key players, etc. So it generates a ton of different requests to Google or whatever search engine they're using behind the scenes. Then it gets the first results, it reads through them, and then it generates a set of follow-up questions and follow-up requests. So it's not just 50 Google requests and then summary of it. It's actually doing some decision making about which sources to use and creates next questions based on the answers it got from the initial questions. That's why it also takes so long, right?
I think it applies critical thinking as well, right?
Yes, reasoning, right? So it plans the steps that it will need to take to create this analysis, and then it works quite a holistic workflow to arrive to the results. And then the results that you're getting are extremely detailed and long, and it's quite difficult to verify, especially if you're not a professional or not a specialist in a particular field, right? Like me or Sven, we don't have nothing to do with car paints market. But it supports everything with quotes and with sources, so you can verify various facts that it discloses through the sources. And from my experience, at least, with working with this instrument, it's really good, right? So it really uses good sources, and it also cross-checks various sources. So it's rarely would really hallucinate something. And you are able to track most of the facts. So we were running a lot of different queries on transfer pricing market, on specific aspects of transfer pricing analysis, on benchmarks, and all the answers that I was getting were really good, really good. So I think this is very helpful and very useful instrument, especially for this relatively low risk, high effort tasks like preparing industry analysis for transfer pricing. Really good stuff. And look at the level of detail. So this is something like 8 pages of Word document with images and with all the sources about this market, with all the regulations described, consumer and industry demand, and competitive landscape. So this is like really, you can just take it and to use through your transfer pricing documentation and use it almost as is.
It may be good to ask for a more concise version, right?
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's also a helpful feature that you can continue working with this document in this chat, right? So you can say, okay, now can you just summarize it in 2,000 words instead of having this extremely detailed one?
And maybe provide a few examples of industry analysis that you conducted earlier.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the good thing is that you can also, I think, have projects for it, right? So you can have a project for industry analysis where you would have a detailed instruction of how you want the industry analysis look like, which sections, which level of detail, and then it will run deep research and already format it in the way that you want it to be formatted.
And so it can also use your own sources to conduct the deep
No,
research.
I don't think it's like will use your own sources, but at least it will be, if you will tell it in the instruction to use certain sources, it will generally do that, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so being conscious of time, let me just show you another request that I ran through deep research so that you understand like what are the specific transfer pricing use case. So I asked it to analyze transfer pricing disputes involving contract manufacturers and prepare a detailed report with summaries of those disputes and key takeaways, global, not specific geography or industry focus. It asked me a few follow-up questions like which period I wanted to be covered, what kind of rulings I want to be covered, are there any regulatory perspectives I want to be covered, etc., etc. And then I said, well, recent disputes, all sources, case studies oriented, my typical style of just do everything. And then it selected a few cases, and I was able to verify most of them because I know them. Yeah, if you know more of those case studies, also you let me know. I don't think it's exclusive list because, well, there are a lot of disputes in transfer pricing from all around the world, so you don't need to look at that as an exclusive list. But I think it captured quite a few interesting and prominent cases that are relevant for globally, basically. So, for example, United States Coca-Cola foreign supply point manufacturers, very famous case where Coca-Cola had issues with defending its position in the US with their foreign manufacturers, which were not contract manufacturers, according to their perspective, but IRS thought those are effectively contract manufacturers. So I think that's also pretty remarkable that it's not just, so it understood that I'm interested in contract manufacturers, and then it found a case where tax authorities kind of reclassified entities and contract manufacturers effectively, without like contract manufacturing being like at the core of that case effectively. So it's like, I think it's pretty remarkable that it picked this case. I like this fact. Medtronic and Puerto Rico manufacturing, another US famous case. And then it also found a few Indian cases, which I was not aware of. Maybe someone from India can verify if those cases are indeed relevant. And then I explicitly asked it to provide the positions of tax authorities and taxpayers, and also summarize them and give me some implications about what those cases may mean for me if I'm a contract manufacturer, right? And it did all that analysis. Should you base your transfer pricing policies off of that? I don't think so, right? I think it's the level of detail that it gives you for a specific case will depend on how well this case is covered by advisors' articles on web, right? It's not, there is no objective measure of how impactful the case is. It will just lean towards reflecting on cases which are well represented and well described on the internet. That's why we see those cases, because probably like those cases were well covered by someone in their blogs and their articles. However, I think it's still very useful because it does analyze the problem for you and gives you a very detailed and interesting analysis and summary that you can read and know more about it as a transfer pricing professional. And every time I launch the deep research for transfer pricing topic, even though I'm working in transfer pricing for 12 years, I discover something new. I find something interesting in what it is able to discover, or some connections that it can make, which I didn't think about. So I think it's a really remarkable resource as well.
It's very interesting to have this fresh perspective at your fingertips, right? Like just a colleague where you can, that always has something interesting to tell. And maybe it doesn't always have the depth that you're looking for, but at least you're aware now of a certain case. And if you want to have more depth on this specific case, you can of course just go to the court that ruled the case and get the source data and put it into the AI for more detailed analysis.
Exactly. Okay, cool. I think that was all on the deep research. So if you don't have access yet, just wait and then just go and try it. I think it's really cool and very helpful in the real work that we do as transfer pricing professionals. I think the last one, which I will cover, cherry on the top, is benchmarking studies, right? So just to summarize on the workflow that we typically do when we do benchmarks, if we do it manually, we have a set of companies that we need to analyze from the database, and then we go and manually review the websites of those companies and summarize what those companies are doing and making some decisions about those companies too. And then the final outcome is to arrive to the set of companies that are either acceptable or rejectable for functional profile or whatever business model we're searching it for. Let's say we're searching for a distributor. So it sounds like you could use something like Perplexity for it, where maybe in the database you have a company like that. I'm just copy-pasting it from a database. So you have a company which is called Digital 360. It's in Italy, and then you have a website of that company from the database, and then maybe you can ask it to write an overview of this company. And then what it will do, it will go and write an overview of that company. So overview meaning, well, what does it actually do? It may look quite good. And it does use sources. It does use the official website of the company. So that's a page that I provided to it. However, I think like in real life, we typically look for something else. We don't just need a summary. We need some additional details about the company. So what we do is something like that. Please analyze this company and extract any information available about its legal structure, ownership, affiliations, offices in other countries, and acquisitions. And you probably know why I'm asking that, because oftentimes when we do benchmarking study, we will reject companies that are not independent and belong to the group. And well, I give it the same company. Let's see what the result will be. Okay, so I will analyze it. It gives me some details about legal structure, meaning that the name includes SPA, which stands for Society di Azioni in Italy. The provided text doesn't give any direct information on the ownership. It doesn't give any information about affiliations, no information about offices, and no information about acquisitions. The funny thing is that if we open this website, we will quite quickly discover that, because I checked this company before, we will quite quickly discover that this company is actually having foreign offices and has belongs to the group companies. And if we look at contacts,
it was just on the main page, right? Or...
yeah, it's you have certain facts on the page. For example, like this one, Digital 360 acquired 37 companies to date. So all of that directly says that this company is definitely not independent, and it wasn't able to capture it. The reason for that is that it actually uses only the homepage in this scenario, and it just doesn't do this research within the website, basically, and doesn't collect all the sources that are relevant, and doesn't really summarize them well. And as a result, it looks at very limited piece of information and then gives you the answer based on that. So that's one of the significant limitations of using Perplexity or alternative web search-enabled tools. It wouldn't use sources properly, and sometimes even if it will, it wouldn't summarize them properly and wouldn't document the process along the way quite well. That's why I think our conclusion at this point is that using generic tools for benchmarking is not really working really well. And maybe I'll just show you the, we have a short summary of those points here. So it actually takes quite long and requires manual copy pasting, even if you try using Perplexity, because you would typically face like 200, 300 companies in your benchmark. And imagine you need to copy paste each one in the chat, wait for it to analyze it, copy it back, verify it. So it doesn't actually look like effective process. It seems that like reviewing companies manually versus that approach maybe still more or less take you more or less the same time. As I mentioned, it doesn't use all the sources well and doesn't capture sources. So like things like screenshots or how the website looked like at the moment it was doing the analysis also doesn't really work. And it still requires quite a comprehensive prompting, which also, again, it has troubles following because of all the various structures of the pages and the content. And therefore, current observation is that the time saving and quality is not yet there for those tools to be helpful in benchmarking analysis.
One advantage of using this is, of course, that you have a nice summary of the activities in the company, right? That would be more extensive than if you would do it manually.
Yes. The only problem is that the summary may be incorrect because it will just use like a home page, for example, right? That's the problem.
Downside.
Yeah. But maybe you can play around with projects and other things and to get better summaries. I think that may be possible. But still, you would still face a need to copy paste things here and there for 300 companies, which doesn't sound fun. All right. I think we're almost done. First of all, thank you very much for joining us today. I think it was a great way to also reflect on various transfer pricing use cases for AI and LLMs. We discussed which tools are available, how the progress looks like, and how to use them to certain use cases. I think it works or serves more as an inspiration rather than direct instruction. However, if you want to recreate project for functional analysis, just let me know. I'm happy to share with you my prompt and my library of functions, assets, and risks, and entity characterizations. That's fine. I can send it to you. Just ping me on LinkedIn or via email. Happy to do that. Be aware of those tools. Keep being interested in them as they develop. Try them, especially new things like deep research. I think there is a ton of value for transfer pricing professionals there. And let's be in touch. We're really excited about the future of our profession with all the powerful AI tools, more generic ones like we've shown today, more specialized ones like we have with arm's length AI benchmarks. If you're interested in benchmarks specifically and how AI can be implemented there, also happy to chat about that. Just reach out to us. Sven, anything from your side?
No, I want to thank everyone for watching this webinar. And yeah, it's just a really interesting dynamic field. The world of AI is moving very fast, and I think it's very interesting to follow it a bit and see how you can apply it in your own job. And we showed a few examples or use cases, and we will be very interested to hear your use case as well. So if you want to discuss a few, let me know. Always happy to have a chat and to think along as well.
Great. With this very sunny picture of Sven, let's finish. And thanks again. Talk soon.
Bye.